All right, welcome back to the Young Turks at the DSC. Jake Uygur, John Irola. And look at this, Representative Dean Phillips joins us. We're just missing Marianne.
I could go find her. Send out a search party.
So, Dean, you ran for president in the primary. You got a lot of flack for it. I know I was there, and I experienced it, but I think you got the worst end of it. And so I think it's okay for you to say it. You feel a little vindication here.
You know, Cenk, I got to tell you, the mission has been vindicated. That's what this is about. You and I have talked about this so many times about the system, this duopoly that suppresses competition. And I really wanted to shine light on two things: that we can do this better, that competition is always accretive to success, and that Joe Biden wasn't going to win. You knew that. I knew that. I think a lot of people knew it. But it is not advantageous for one's political career when you're already elected to tell the truth. And that's a disease, I think, that has now permeated a lot of our elected offices. And it is a vindication to feel the joy and the energy and the transformation just for making a simple change. Because it's not about a person. It's about a country and a principle. And that's what you and I both worked to achieve. And I'm so glad that at least half the battle has now been won.
Yeah, and so, you know, I told you this off air, but I'm gonna say it again. So look, it's a little easier for me, and I'm an outsider. Easier for Marianne Williamson, who was in the primary, outside, right? But you're a sitting U.S. congressman, and you know, the press was kind to you, the party was kind to you. You already had you had a lot to lose there, so I think it took tremendous courage for you to do what you did. And I appreciate it, and I hope this whole place appreciates it, which leads to my question, which is, what's the sense you get now, the reaction back to you, as opposed to when you were running?
A journalist wrote today that it seems like Dean Phillips has been welcomed back to the popular kids table, which, you know, another way of putting it, yeah, it feels good. And based on what you just said, I went to Vietnam last year, right before I declared my candidacy, because my dad died in the Vietnam War, and I went to the site where he was killed. I remember flying back home that night and thinking to myself, you know, he and a million others have literally given their lives in service, whether it be in wars that were just or those that are unjust. But the point was, why shouldn't we in Congress, you know, be willing to lose our jobs, let alone those Americans who are willing to lose their lives over fighting injustice and speaking truth? And that really inspired me. And I just hope future generations of public servants, my colleagues, can see that they can actually step out of line. They can be dissent. They can practice dissent. They can speak their truth. And as they're watching me now, as opposed to 6 months ago, being welcomed back, I hope that's a little bit of some inspiration for others who we will need to speak truth to power and say the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, and before I go to John, real quick on that note, look, on the show, we talk about open minds all the time, right? And so what I appreciate about, for example, Ro Khanna is even when he knows we're gonna vehemently disagree, he'll come on the show and defend his position, right? And so, and you and I agree on a lot of things, and we don't agree on some things in terms of policy, right? But I appreciate you for your courage, and that makes a giant difference. And so that's why, guys, always open minds, open hearts, and that's what Congressman Phillips showed as he did that race. And yeah, I think you deserve to be vindicated here, and I'm relieved to hear that that they're saying, okay, nice job, Dean, thank you.
Right. Yeah. So in terms of the mission being vindicated, obviously, like this particular one, hopefully will be. Looking forward, like Joe Biden, the stakes were about as high as they could be for a candidate being, you know, not able to really run the campaign, not have a chance of winning. He's not the only politician that has perhaps overstayed their welcome at like the Senate level. Do you think going forward, will people be a little bit more comfortable maybe having that conversation? Do you think that the media will feel a little bit more pressure to acknowledge a primary? Coming out of this, will there be any lessons learned?
Well, look, it's really easy right now to say absolutely. But boy, history teaches us that some of the most overt experiences do not translate into a change of behavior. And I came to Congress in 2019 calling for a new generation of Democratic leadership in the House. Nancy Pelosi, Jim Clyburn, Steny Hoyer had been in their positions 20 years. When Dianne Feinstein was clearly in decline, when Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Joe Biden, you know, we should not be, this is not a game of personalities. This is a game of principle. And I do hope, can't promise it, but I do hope that this reawakens people to recognize the consequences of protecting people who are in decline. And this is an unusual matchup where Donald Trump made this election about age. And lo and behold, I hope it still is an election about age. And he's just on the other side of this table. But man, I'm not convinced yet that we're going to learn the lessons we need. And that's why I also believe in term limits, that we have too many people serving too long, and that prevents a new generation from even participating, for even to have a chance to participate. That, to me, is the biggest issue, and that's why I think we need 18-year term limits in the House and Senate combined, and also the Supreme Court. It's healthy to have new ideas, and I think we're missing the boat as it relates to that.
Yeah, of course, I couldn't agree more, but I wanted to ask you, in your run, did you learn something once you were banished to the role of outsider, right? And heritage.
Once, it took like a day.
Right.
At least I'm from Minnesota, so it's kind of like Siberia.
That's a good point. But it got worse and worse, right? Then they attacked you more and attacked you more. Did you learn something from that experience that you didn't know before?
Oh, I sure did. I'll tell you, to this very moment, what to me is the most egregious example of what you're talking about is MSNBC. The figurehead for the Democratic Party. I did not receive a single invitation, other than one the day after the South Carolina primary, which was Joe Biden's high watermark, of course. But not one invitation from October, when I declared my candidacy, to this very moment. And I think that says something about what is happening. There is a connection, as you probably suspect. There is a political industrial complex that activates when initiated to suppress or to deplatform. And you and Marianne, we all deserved a little bit of platform. That's all we were asking for. Not asking for the nomination, not asking for a hall pass. We were asking for simply the opportunity to make our case to American Democratic voters. It doesn't seem like too much to ask. And that is what really did surprise me. But I'm glad I went through that crucible. I hope you are too, because only with that discovery can we now maybe try to do something about it and shine some damn light on a subject that I know neither party wants to be exposed. And that is the result of two private corporations that do not have any accountability to American voters. And I'm not sure most voters are even aware of that fact. And I think I'm going to be on a mission soon to speak that truth.
Yeah, I'm curious, like there's been a lot of talk about, Joe Biden's perhaps lingering resentment over being pushed out. I'm wondering, do you feel when you see, during the primary, as you point out, CNN and MSNBC could have had forums, could have had town halls. They just chose not to. Like when I follow The Daily. It's one of the podcasts I follow. No coverage whatsoever. And then you see, as soon as the debate happens and there's pressure to step down, suddenly it feels like all those media outlets have always been very serious about this, and they acknowledge the concerns and all that, even though they completely erased the primary. Any resentment over the turn to now want to claim that you were always in the right, you were always aware of the problems, you always covered that when they didn't, when it perhaps would have been a little bit better?
I think it's a fair contention. You recall too that CNN hosted a town hall for I think 5 of the Republican candidates, 1 hour primetime town halls for the Republican candidates. I can only believe, I don't have proof, but I can only believe that there is some kind of a unspoken deal between certain elements of either the Democratic Party, DNC, the White House, that poses a threat to a news or media organization that would violate the terms of that unspoken rule. And the lifeblood of mainstream media is access to information, to leaks, and to talent. And if you risk ruining that, you're risking your entire enterprise. And I think it is that conflict of interest that has to be explored a little bit in American media, because that's probably the single biggest epiphany, disappointment. And if I have a modicum of resentment, it's that. It is the deplatforming of the American media of candidates. And I think there is some type of a tied house or conflict of interest that at least should be explored. I'm not trying to create a conspiracy, but I think at least needs to be explored.
Yeah, and it's not at all conspiratorial. It's natural incentives and disincentives, but the rules need to be fixed, because otherwise, the incentives are perverse. They need access, etc., and it creates a system that you can see how the mechanics of it work. And to your point, so for those of you unaware, me, Dean Phillips, and Marianne Williamson were in the race. We did one joint appearance on TYT, and we did a debate on News Nation. Dan Abrams did that. That's great. But otherwise, we were shut out, right? And at one point, Marianne had significantly higher poll ratings than Nikki Haley, and Nikki Haley was all over cable news and had a town hall, etc. and none of the three of us could possibly get, that kind of coverage, the town halls, et cetera. And so it became obvious, like it became harder and harder to hide the ball on that one. But I wanted to ask you about fellow Democrats, et cetera here. So do you think at this point that they get that we were running not because we thought, oh yeah, we're gonna magically become president and it's high likelihood and we think it's 51% chance, that's why we ran? No, guys, we were trying to help. We were trying to get you a better candidate. Do you think they finally get that now?
I'd like to think so. Do I believe so? Not yet. I've said to many that we're trying to be Paul Revere, not George Washington, right? And it saddens me that people assume this was some egomaniacal, fool's errand, right? And I hope, and that's the message I've been sending to everybody. And I will say that most of the people here who've approached me, have made comments that would indicate that they do understand now what we're trying to do. Because I don't recall any of us really disparaging President Biden or demeaning him. We were trying to say that he's going to lose America. By the way, what we're really trying to say is that the Democratic Party better listen to voters. They were saying it more loudly than we ever could because 5% of them, if you recall, wanted a different nominee when we started our campaigns. That's not all Americans, that's just Democratic voters. So for the party to ignore that kind of polling when a majority of its own voters are saying we'd like at least an alternative, therein lies the big issue. And I hope, but I can't say with certainty that that lesson will be learned because every cycle will present its version, I think, of what we went through in protecting the incumbent. And I think we should talk about that for one moment, which is, it is the nature of the incumbency. We usually felt that that power accrued to the incumbent based on voters. I think it's actually the media. It's the incumbency advantage relative to the media that is so significant and very difficult to overcome. And that's what we were trying to say. Just have a competition, show up at one debate. And if we had that debate and America could have seen that live and in person with their own eyes, I think this might have been a very different outcome earlier.
Yeah, if Biden had stumbled with us, it would not have been as bad, as embarrassing, as et cetera. And we would have been able to get to that conclusion earlier, right? You don't want him losing to Trump, So the way that it happened was not the best way. The better way would have been to test him in the primaries, make sure you got the right guy. And why did we enter the race in the first place? Because we saw the polling saying he's not going to win, right? So the polling isn't us, the polling is the American people. That's the voters and that's the Democratic voters. And so we were in response to that. We didn't push that pulled us in.
It's the essence of democracy.
Yeah.
Representation.
Yeah.
And that's why Americans are so damn angry, including many people watching and listening right now. Because when your voices are not heard, whether it's at home, in a personal relationship, professional, or certainly political, you don't feel heard, you're gonna get angry. And we got a lot of angry Americans because of this system that is really diminishing their voices. And that's problematic and should be for all of us.
Yep. So last question. Curious what you're gonna do in the future. I know that there might be a governor position open soon in Minnesota, your home state. Let's hope there is, right? Because we want, of course, Tim Walz to win.
I think this is a great example of it is sometimes better to be lucky than to be smart. Because what has transpired, if this happened 2 months ago, and Kamala Harris had to then pander to the, to elements that would have made a more difficult path, if you will, to the general election. If it had happened earlier in this wave, maybe it didn't take her all. I mean, there's a lot of things that have transpired that I would not have argued would have been beneficial. And in a strange way, we might be feeling a little bit of divine intervention in a way that maybe the former president experienced when he was spared from that bullet not long ago. And that's a very strange outcome that I never would have anticipated.
And look, it's especially divine intervention for progressives because we're thrilled with the Tim Walz selection, right? Yeah,
talk about that.
Yeah, so your state, you know what? Minnesota's got a lot to be proud of. You're the congressman who went and did the right thing, led to the right result, and then Tim Walz, the governor, gets picked as the VP. God bless Minnesota.
Yeah, well, Senator Klobuchar says all the time in Minnesota, when a baby is born, new parents put the baby on their laps and say, one day, my child, you too may become vice president of the United States of America. Because we might have, when Tim Walz becomes a VP, that will be the third Democratic vice president of the last 6 Democratic vice presidents: Hubert Humphrey, Walter Mondale, and Tim Walz. So
That is amazing.
we are good at producing number 2. That didn't come out well, but you know what I mean.
I think the bumper sticker fits that well as it
Yeah, maybe that's my next pursuit, making bumper stickers from my faux pas.
All right, Representative Dean Phillips, I would argue American hero. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.